Today's show is sponsored by the ABV Barrel Shop. The ABV Barrel Shop is located in the St. Louis metro community of Arnold, Missouri, and is the world's first single barrel only liquor store. This store is owned and operated by Steve Akeley and Jim Fosnot. Get signed up for their email distribution list to find out when the store will be opening, what their hours will be, and most importantly, what they will have in inventory at abvbarrelshop.com. We are also sponsored by The Bar to Go. The Bar to Go offers a fully customizable carrying case that allows you to take your favorite distilled spirits or cocktail ingredients with you. Whether you're looking for yourself, a customized gift, or logo items for your business or event, The Bar to Go can help. Check them out at thebar2go.com. Use the number 2 when you type out The Bar to Go. Did you know Neely Family Distillery now ships its popular distilled spirits directly to you? To order, simply call 859-394-3258. Tell them the ABV Network sent you. And now, on to the show. All right, here we are. We've got Maggie Kimberl and Brandon Collins on the Bourbon Talk Show today. And this is really fun. What do you remember about this one, McNew?
Trauma.
Why trauma? Oh, that's right. That's right. Maggie's wearing a snake when she shows up.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Oh, yeah.
It's all, yeah, it was a good show, but my papa wanted, Maggie has a snake. We weren't recording yet, so really nobody saw my face unless they
I should have hit record and captured that, because literally Maggie was wearing a snake. She had it like draped around her. And so when you come, and she was there before you. And then when you come on, there she is with that snake on.
Yeah, you guys can still see part of it on YouTube too. That video's out there, but not the initial reaction. The rest of my face cringing the whole time.
Yeah. So the bottom line, would you go to Maggie's house? You're a big fan of Maggie. You look up to her. She's done great things in the bourbon industry. If she was kind of mentoring you and said, "Hey, come by the house, let's do some tastings, and let's talk business," would you spend the night there?
No, like I would, if she has like an outdoor space, like a little garden or a table outdoors, you can have an outdoor meeting with the snakes very much inside.
You wouldn't go to her house because of the snake? It's in a cage.
I can't.
But the best thing is, though, is that I'm pretty sure during that interview, she said, because she was just kind of fostering those snakes for her friend. And I'm pretty sure she said they were almost to the end of the time that they were staying there, and then they were going to go home to their actual owners.
Yeah,
but remember, the funny thing was, it was like a 10-year fostering time. It's like insane.
She pretty much raised them, and now they're going to go home.
She did say that she was going to be sending them back. So I don't have to follow up, see if she did or not. I have no idea. But.
If they're gone, 100%, would love to hang out, but not if they're still there. I need confirmation first.
Well, this is a fun episode because Maggie and Brandon became friends during the episode. I know that Brandon ended up sending her some whiskey, and Maggie hadn't tried anything from Taconic before. So it's interesting stuff, and it's a fun offshoot of doing what we do, is the connections that sometimes people make. And it's on all of our virtual events and stuff like that. It's fun when, people from the industry get to know one another that didn't know each other before because of us. So fun stuff. Here you go. Here's our interview with Maggie Kimbrell and Brandon Collins.
Let's drink!
Our first guest is coming off a year serving as president of Bourbon Women, is a noted author and presence in the world of bourbon. Please join me in welcoming Maggie Kimbrell. Hello. Hey, Maggie.
Hey.
How you doing?
Just handed off the snake to my son so McNew can take a deep breath.
Thank you.
McNew can stop hyperventilating. So yeah.
Deep cleansing breath. Deep cleansing breath.
Yes. So, yeah, obviously, we've talked already about the snakes. You seem like a big proponent of it. It sounds like a great pet. How old were your sons when you got them? You're talking 10 years ago. So how old were they? So my kids are 12 and 14, about to turn 13 and 15. Okay. So, they are pretty lit. I think we got them actually on my oldest son's 5th birthday. Okay. Yeah.
And so, we've been taking care of them for about 10 years, and they've been great pets. We've really enjoyed having them. But it's time for them to get back to their original owner. So they can enjoy them for the last few years that they're going to be around. They're nearing the end of their lifespan. So their natural lifespan is somewhere in the 20 to 25 range. So he's 20 and my girl that I didn't bring on, Trinity, is 15.
15. Okay. So, and help me make this point one last time, because McNew and I have had this debate. Matter of fact, it's been pulled into the Bourbon Talk Show a little bit. What's worse, snakes or mice and rats? And, McNew has been steadfast that snakes are worse. If a snake ever got in your house, it's way. And I'm like, no, rats or mice are way worse. They're dirty. Rats definitely. Mice definitely worse, in my opinion, and kind of that kind of informs how I ended up in the situation, because the kids wanted a pet rat, and I said I will only get a rat in this house if we are feeding it to a snake. Yeah.
And they said, oh, well, can we get a snake? And I was like, oh, well, I just walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. What, Maggie, what kind of pets did you have as a kid when you were growing up?
Not a whole lot. I mean, we had cats. When I was little, we had dogs sometimes, but not we didn't keep them for a long time for some reason. I don't know what the backstory is there.
Behavioral issues, probably.
Well, yeah. I mean, somebody was misbehaving.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't the dog. But we did have cats. And then when I moved in with my dad, we lived on a farm. And so I like to refer to this as my dad's ADHD hobby farm. Right. So it was we started off with a couple of horses and some cats. And then one day there was a duck in my kitchen. And then it was alive in a cage. And then there were more ducks, and then there were chickens. And then I went away to college and I came home and there were goats. And then I moved out and I came back and there were cows. And then I moved out and then I, came back a couple years later and there were pigs. So, I've experienced the whole range of livestock and pets. Yes.
Yeah. So Maggie, you and I have known each other for a while, and I know your personal story. I got to be a host, so I have to ask questions, even if you think I've told them this before. And I do know that your first foray really into working in bourbon, you could say, is you worked at a liquor store, but that's just being an employee, and that could be interchanged with any job. You worked at a pet store, a grocery store. Sure. But when did you really start getting into the world of bourbon? And then the second part to that question is, do you remember the first time you actually got paid for something other than working at the liquor store? Because I know you got paid for that. But
absolutely, yeah. So I mean, when I was working in the liquor store, I was trying to figure out what kind of marketable skills I could learn there for when I started my real job. That was definitely a real job. And I worked very hard when I was doing that, even though it was part-time. But I worked part-time at the liquor store and my kids were little because there were no kids there. And that was great. So I went in wanting to learn about wine, actually, because I thought hey, I have a lot of food service experience already. So maybe if I learn about wine, then, that can kind of help me level up in my career. And I quickly realized that wine people were not my people. Right. And, got a little bit into craft beer and also realized craft beer dudes are, a little almost as intense as the wine people.
Oh, yeah.
One of my coworkers yelled at me because I drank beer out of a bottle instead of putting it in a glass. And I was like, okay, we're done with this now. And I was really into the farm to table movement. I was really into, I always had a big garden. I grew a lot of vegetables. I did a lot of canning and preserving of vegetables and all that sort of thing. So I was really into the locavore movement specifically, trying to eat things that are close to home. And I kind of started looking at the bourbon aisle one day and I said, hey, they make this right down the street. I should probably learn about it. And that was back in the days, this was probably 2010 when I started there. So it's been about 12 years. And that was back when the master distillers would go and sit in the liquor store and sign bottles and nobody knew who they were. Yeah. So, I got to meet Jimmy Russell, and Chris Morris made me a mint julep one time. And, I was meeting all these guys just in the liquor store during my normal shift. And it was great. Because, I could hear them, the conversations that they were having, and I could ask them questions and all that sort of thing. And so, I hate to beat this dead horse. I feel like I've told this story a million times, but the way that I ended up transitioning from that into writing was, Jim Rutledge was in my store back when he was still with Four Roses. This would have been probably about 2011, 2012. And it was Derby week. And every time I would try to go talk to him, a whole horde of people would come in and I would have to go right back to the cash register. And so that went on the entire 3 or 4 hours that he was there. So I went and sat down in the break room eating my sad little peanut butter sandwich. And the next thing I knew, Jim Rutledge came through the door with bottles in one hand and cups in the other hand. And he was like, you didn't get to do my tasting. And so he actually sat down with me for 20 minutes, taught me the proper bourbon tasting technique, taught me a little bit about the history of Four Roses, why they have 10 different recipes, which ones are in this bottle and what you can taste, and which ones are in this bottle and what you can taste. And I was like, this is amazing. I have to tell the whole world about this. And so I quit my job and started writing about whiskey. So I got a job as a writer for Louisville.com, which was an extension of Louisville Magazine. Mm-hmm. And the first story I think I published was maybe top 10 bourbon bars in Louisville.
Yeah.
And I think I made $4 to do that article.
$4, so,
yes. So I did that for a month, and then I was like, yeah, I mean, this is a lot of work for not a lot of money. And then they were like, oh, hey, how about if we give you a tiny raise? So I think I was making $10 an article after that. And I did that for 3 years. And then I moved on to the Whiskey Wash and Alcohol Professor, and then started with Whiskey Magazine about 7 years ago now, I think. And have been with them ever since, and helped to launch American Whiskey Magazine, where I'm now the content editor.
Yeah. When you're doing, a job like you have, it can be tough to define. So imagine you bumping into somebody maybe you hadn't been in touch with since grade school or something like that. What do you say you do? Because you host events, you write, you have a job with the magazine. There's a lot of different things you do. How would you quickly summarize what you do for a living?
Well, so my defense mechanism is that I don't. I just kind of go, what are you doing now? Because right. I feel like it's too much. It's too, and at a certain point, it really kind of feels like I'm bragging, because my life is literally most people's fantasy camp. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, my elevator pitch is I'm the content editor of American Whiskey Magazine and a contributing editor to Whiskey Magazine. And I am a freelancer for a bunch of different spirits publications. And I judge, whiskey competitions and cocktail competitions and teach classes about spirits.
Right. Yeah. It does sound pretty fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I almost feel bad saying that. And I'm like, so tell me about your job as an accountant. That sounds neat.
Yeah.
I have to pick on accountants. My husband's an accountant, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this year, you finished out your term as president of Bourbon Women. Tell us a little bit about your time there and what it was like.
It was really great. So that was actually my first experience of being part of an enthusiast group. So I've never been an enthusiast. I didn't start in this job because I was an enthusiast. I started because I wanted to tell the story of Kentucky bourbon. So it's always been a profession for me. And so it was really interesting to me to get to know the enthusiast side of what's going on out there, because, I spend a lot of time with enthusiast groups, and I go on barrel picks with enthusiast groups, and I go to the events that they put on and things like that. But I had really never, and I didn't realize this until I was actually, a month in. I was like, oh, hey, this is different than what I'm used to. Right. So, I learned a lot about enthusiast groups and, that kind of relationship between brands and enthusiast groups. The enthusiast groups are doing a lot of great work for the industry as well. The work that these enthusiast groups out there are doing is really, really important. Bourbon Women has the only women focused consumer whiskey show in the United States, or probably in the world, as far as, I've never heard of another one. Right. So they have the symposium conference that happens every August, and it's all women. It's an all women whiskey show. And it's really refreshing because you don't get a whole lot of those dude bros who like know more than you.
Right.
When you're in that crowd, it's all these people who are just like inspired and inspiring. So it's really neat. And then you have, you know, groups like Kobe and the Black Bourbon Society and things like that. You know, these are bringing segments of the consumer population that have really been, you know, underserved, mainly because, you know, I think brands didn't know what to do with them for a long time. And so these enthusiast groups are really important. And so it was a good perspective for me to really see the work that enthusiast groups were doing and how important that was and how that kind of functioned from the inside.
Yeah. And it's such an important group. It's a large group. It had to take up a lot of your time. I'm sure the past year has been focused just about exclusively on that.
It was a full-time job. Yeah, it was a full-time salaried position. Absolutely. And like there were other people. I was the only full-time salaried person who worked in that organization, but we had lots of contractors and part-time people and you know, management companies and all that sort of thing, because it is a huge organization. There, you know, as of the last time I checked, there were members in 39 states in Australia, and 15 branches, including the Louisville branch. So it was a massive organization. All these branches had, you know, sometimes hundreds of people in them. So it was a very large machine that was kind of always in motion.
Yeah. So what do you do as you leave that? You've got this extra time. Are you rededicating your stuff to the things that you worked on before? Are you trying to do new things? Tell us about, to give us an update where you're at today.
So before I started, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I spent 7 years in a marketing startup that was actually just received a major award. They were named #1 content marketing firm, I believe worldwide. Which I just saw today, which I'm very proud of, because that was a startup that I joined, and I worked there for 7 years. So I quit that in 2020. Is that correct? Yeah, 2020. I have to think what year we're in. We're kind of in this time warp still. I quit that at the end of 2020 because I wanted to write a book. You know, I'd been doing all the, you know, online stuff and magazines and all that sort of thing. And I kind of wanted to focus, you know, take some time and focus and get, you know, pen to paper and start working on a book. And so then 2 weeks after I quit, I was approached about, you know, becoming the president of Bourbon Women. And I was like, well, you know, obviously I can't pass that up. So I did that for a year. And then, but, you know, there was kind of this feeling like, I really need to get back to that book, you know, and I'm not going to have time if I keep doing this. I can't do both. I can still do the magazine and do Bourbon Women, but I can't, like, I need a lot of bandwidth to churn out this book. So I've actually been working on a book, and I'm about 10,000 words into what I'm shooting for, a 20,000 word book right now, and about to start another one. And I actually sold a book contract last year, but was not able to sign it because I couldn't get all the necessary permissions that I needed from the places that I needed to do the research.
Yeah.
And I finally just got through to the folks that I needed to there just last week. So that one's going to be moving forward. And I'm really excited about that, because that was one, you know, I was going to walk away from it, but I was not going to be happy about it. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep trying a little bit longer. And, you know, so hopefully we'll get everything, you know, in place for that, so that can happen.
Well, congrats on that. Can't wait to learn more as the information becomes available. Well, guess what? It's time for a McNew question. Something new we added this season. McNew asked a question to our guests right in the middle of the interview. So McNew, what do you got today?
Yeah, so my original question was, what's your dream job? But I'm going to change it to, can you tell us what the book's about? Just a hint.
Ooh.
Oh, geez.
You know what? I feel like, not because I want to be secretive, but because like I don't want to. There are a lot of people who know that I've talked to about it. Well, I guess I can go ahead and say the one that I'm working on, that I'm almost finished with. I'm working on an American whiskey and cigar pairing book. That's something that I've been, I've been teaching that class at the New Orleans Bourbon Festival. I started that 6 years ago, started writing about this even longer ago with Michael Veach, and I write the whiskey and cigar pairings for the magazine. I've been doing that since the beginning, and we're 18 issues in. Is this 18? This is this is 17. So we're 17 issues in, and so I've been doing this for quite some time. And as far as I know, there's really nothing out there that addresses this in a meaningful way. So that's what I'm working on right now. I hope nobody comes along and steals my book idea, but if they do, they're not going to be as good at it as I am.
Exactly.
So steal away.
Right. Exactly.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maggie, you just mentioned Mike Veach. And how did you get to become friends with Mike?
So back when I was a beat writer with Louisville.com, I really just covered the bourbon beat. The nice thing about that job, even though it paid like garbage, I had a lot of freedom. So I got to choose what I wrote about. And so I just kind of leveraged that to say, you know what, the bourbon thing's happening right now, and really nobody's covering this on a local basis consistently. And so that's going to be my place. And so I just, anytime I was invited to an event, I showed up. And I would write about it, and, there were a lot of events going on back then, in the before times, as we like to say. And so I started going to a bunch of Michael Veach's events. He was still working at the Filson Historical Society at that point. And so they would have, different events at different venues where they would have him come out, and they would, talk about bourbon history. And then, they have a massive collection of aged whiskeys that they would oftentimes pull out and pour. So not only was I getting to learn history through him, I was also getting to try history, which was great. And then I was writing about it. And so, I kept seeing him. And one of the things, I'm very SEO oriented because of, the marketing job that I had. So I always want to make sure that, if you have a business, I would like to link to it. Because I want you to get that recognition and, let people know where to find you. So I would always say, hey, do you have a website? And he was like, no, I'm working on it. And so after, it was probably a year of, how's that website coming along? Right. When I was finally like, can I just build you a website? It'll take me like 3 hours. So I took my laptop over and sat at his kitchen table and just built him a website. And I was like, okay, here's your website. He's like, cool. Can you just run it for me? So I've been running his website ever since. And, that's one of the things that I think I'm most proud about in my career, because here's a guy who just has so much to say and so much knowledge. And, he was not getting the opportunity to really share that enough, certainly not as much as he wanted to. And so, I just approached it as, I'm your IT guy and you just write the words. I'll do, I edit him and I do all of his like SEO and all that sort of thing. And, but just, put it out there to the world. And his traffic has grown 50% year over year since it started. And so he is at a place now, I think he's probably getting like 40 or 50,000 hits a month now.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maggie, you live in this world of bourbon, so sometimes you have insight. The casual fan doesn't get her. There's probably people who don't get to travel to go to distilleries and that. What's a distillery that you'd like to recognize as one to watch out for? Or if you're coming to this area, make sure you hit this distillery because they're doing some cool things.
Gosh, that's a really hard one for me. Some of these I haven't been to, but I know that I know the people and I know the passion and that sort of thing. So I actually made myself a little list, and I want to go over a couple of them.
Fair enough.
Old Dominic, obviously, Alex Castle, boss. She is a boss.
Yeah. Yep.
Watershed Distillery in Ohio. They're making some really interesting stuff. One of the most intriguing things they've come out with recently is a Burchino. So they had a Nocino liqueur, which was walnut liqueur, and they made that with a vodka base. That was the tradition, and so they have switched to making that with a bourbon base now, and so that's really exciting to me. They also have a really great ready to drink old fashioned, which was probably one of the best that I tried. Swill Dog, Brook Glover. They started off as a cidery, and they're making some rye whiskey, some bourbon, and they're doing a really nice job. Company Distilling is one that I'm really excited about. A bunch of, big name talent has gone into that distillery, and they're actually going to build a pretty large distillery. And I think they're probably going to be releasing a product here pretty soon if they haven't already.
Okay.
Leopold Brothers. I know, like, if you're a whiskey geek, you know Leopold Brothers, but that 3-chamber rye that just came out was something special, right?
Mm-hmm.
Widow Jane, not a small distillery by any means, just got bought up by Heaven Hill along with Few and a couple of others. But Widow Jane, their 10-year-old bourbon just won World Whiskies Awards for best small batch bourbon. So that's definitely something to watch. Lisa Wicker has an amazing palate.
Yeah.
And she's done really great things with that brand, and her blends are just perfection.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big Lisa Wicker fan. Iron Root Republic, another World Whiskies winner. They actually won best bourbon in the world a couple of years ago at World Whiskies, but they won best corn whiskey this year. And they're just making, I love the Licorice family so much. And Marsha Licorice actually just won an Icons of Whiskey award, I believe, for visitor center manager. Don't quote me on that, but okay. She just got an Icons of Whiskey. So great family, love what they're doing there. Woodinville, I haven't been there, but they're making some phenomenal whiskeys. They're rating very highly in the blind reviews in American Whiskey Magazine, and they're really good. They're making really good stuff. One of the people that I want to highlight is Britney Penny. She's the first Black woman to be the CEO of a Kentucky bourbon brand ever. Her brand is The Nine, and she's making she is sourcing some really amazing stuff and doing the blending herself. But the thing that impresses me the most about her is she came up with this idea when she had a newborn and the baby wasn't sleeping. And she was like, you know what, if I'm not sleeping, I'm just going to go ahead and start a company. And I was like, I wasn't even human again until my kids started kindergarten, and she's starting a company with a newborn. So that's a great story. Incredibly impressed with her, and everybody should get to know Britney Penny. Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are some good ones. And I'm pleased to note that there were several on there that I didn't know. So I need to do my homework and find out a little bit more about them. So that's good stuff. So glad we asked that question. Who are some of your friends in the bourbon industry? This is always interesting. You got some friends? That's a hard one for me, right? Because I feel like we're all friends, but then I'm not like having sleepovers at their house painting our toenails either, though, right? So, I mean, we've got our good friend Fred Mosenter on here. He's a friend. Hi, Fred. Oh yeah, Fred. I just there are a lot of amazing people in this industry. And I really just enjoy getting to know them. Steve Bayshore at Mount Vernon Distillery and Gristmill is probably one of my best friends in the industry. Yeah. He lets me come bug him at work after we judge World Whiskies together on a Thursday every year. And then on a Friday every year, I go bug him at work all day, and I'll row mash in the distillery with them. And, it's a lot of fun, and I learned so much from him. But yeah, there are a lot of really great people in this industry. I mean, I wouldn't want to slight anybody by starting to name a bunch of names and accidentally leaving anybody out. Right. Yeah, I get it. There's so many great stories from bourbon history. And I think that there's enough for us as bourbon fans to have a whole channel dedicated to that. But it's not a big enough market, I guess, to have something that's big. But if you could narrow it down to one, if there's one story that could be told in a feature-length movie, what movie would you focus on? What do you think would be the story that should be told via movie? Mary Dowling. Mary Dowling. Okay. Do you know about Mary Dowling?
No.
McNew, do you know about Mary? Oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys don't know about. Okay, we're producing this movie now.
The Prohibition one? Is she the one?
Yeah, Mary
went to
Dowling
Mexico
owned Waterfill and Fraser, pre-Prohibition in Tyrone, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And when Prohibition hit, she grabbed her still and she grabbed a beam because there was an abundance of beams at that time. And went down to Juarez, Mexico, and started making Waterfill and Fraser bourbon in Mexico. And it was made, Waterfill and Fraser was made in Mexico until that 1964 concurrent resolution that declared bourbon a distinct product of the United States. So, bourbon has not always been made in the United States. Before 1964, it was made both in Mexico and Canada. But Mary Dowling was like, I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm not going to give up my business, because back then, she inherited this business from her husband, if I recall correctly, but she would not have been able to just go out and start another business, and especially, with beverage alcohol and even, post-Prohibition, if she had tried to ride it out, the regulations about that came about really mostly post-Prohibition would have put her out of business anyway. So she was really smart and had a lot of foresight to say, you know what, I'm not going to sit around and wait for this to change. I'm just going to hightail it out of here and keep living my life. And so she's a really amazing individual. If you've ever been to Vendome, they have her copper doubler on their porch, just like sitting out. Mary Dowling's doubler, no big deal.
Yeah.
And I keep telling them, I'm like, can you just build a museum and like make that the centerpiece? Because I feel like that's a pretty significant piece of bourbon history you have just chilling on the back porch.
Yeah.
So, but I think she's an absolutely amazing character, and I would love to see a movie made of her life.
Yeah, no, that would be very interesting for sure. So that would be a fun story. And yeah, the tie-ins to beams and all that cool stuff. And I love it. All right, the last question is always a fun one. We like to, again, kind of get to know our guests a little bit better. What would be your go-to dessert?
You know what? I'm doing keto right now.
Okay.
So I can't have sugar, but I've learned to make a lot of desserts with stevia. And by I've learned, I mean, I've taught my husband. I send him recipes and then he cooks it for me. So like right now I've got a keto chocolate mousse. Okay. I love chocolate mousse, but I also love a really good pavlova. Do you know what a pavlova is?
I do not, no.
So actually, I learned about this dessert from Veach's fiance, Rosemary Miller. So she actually brought this over to my house one time when we had them over for dinner. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like a meringue, but instead of being on top of a pie, you kind of form it into its own little shell, and it's like nice and crispy and crunchy. And then you put some berries and then some whipped cream. It's absolutely lovely and fairly easy to make keto.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Have you figured out a way with Splendid to make a creme brulee? That's my favorite one.
Ooh, you know what? Well, because with the creme brulee, that would be hard because you have to have that crystallized sugar.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how that would work otherwise.
That'd be an experiment.
Yeah. I love cooking with fire. Don't get me wrong. I love blow torches in the kitchen. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Maggie, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll have you back at the end where you can share any contact information, that type of thing. Okay. Let's hear it from Maggie Kimberl, everybody. Absolutely. Hey-o. All right, what we'll do next, we'll take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to be talking to Brandon Collins. We'll do that in just a few. Let's talk about the people who make these shows happen. First up is the ABV Barrel Shop. The ABV Barrel Shop is owned and operated by Steve Akeley and Jim Fosnot in the greater St. Louis area. It is the most unique shopping experience in the world of bourbon, as the ABV Barrel Shop only focuses on single barrels. We aren't open just yet, but our plan is to have the most diverse single barrel offerings from our many friends in the world of bourbon. By signing up for a weekly email, you will know our entire inventory we have on hand. In addition to single barrels, we'll have a tasting bar and a gift shop featuring logo merchandise for both the shop and the ABV network, as well as a full curriculum of bourbon education classes. Additionally, we'll use the gift shop to feature products from our partners in the world of bourbon, companies like Art Eatable Chocolates and Old Man Bay Signs. Head over to ABV Barrel Shop to sign up for our email and text distribution list so you can stay in the know. Hi, this is Steve Akeley, owner of the ABV Network. We're sponsored by the Stave and Thief Society. This is where you, a bourbon enthusiast, can expand your knowledge and emerge a bourbon steward. In 2017, I completed my Executive Bourbon Steward certification. It's the most comprehensive bourbon certification program available and connects you with an expansive network of bourbon enthusiasts and professionals. Check out the full listing of in-person and online certifications and join the society today by enrolling at staveandthief.com. Okay, let's talk about Neely Family Distillery. In 2018, I met Royce Neely at an industry event. He started appearing on our shows, and we became friends during my frequent visits to Kentucky. Today, he's leading the way for young distillers making their mark on the bourbon industry. A visit to Neely Family Distillery combines family history, a look at what makes their products unique, and of course, a tasting through their whiskeys, moonshines, and creams. Check them out at neelyfamilydistillery.com and visit them in Sparta, Kentucky.
This is Kathy Cole. You're listening to the Bourbon Daily.
All right, our next guest used his degree in chemical engineering from Ohio State University, or the Ohio State, as they like to call it, into a job as a distillery supervisor for Buffalo Trace. After discovering a love for New York during his travels, he decided to move to New York, where he works today for Taconic Distillery in Stanfordville, New York. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brandon Collins. Hey, Brandon, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you here. And so tell us a little bit about this thing. You grew up in Carlisle, Ohio, I see, but you moved to New York in 2017. So as you make this move, are there things that you miss from home back in Ohio and you're in New York?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I always had a plan to get out of Ohio all the way back to high school. So Ohio is a really good place to grow up, but a better place to leave.
Okay.
As you can see, like over the last 2 or 3 decades, Ohio's been steadily just losing people.
Yeah. Do you have family back there and stuff? Is it a place that you return to for those type of things?
Yeah. So I still have all my parents and all my aunts and uncles are back in between Ohio and Kentucky. So
gotcha.
They'll go back in that area a lot throughout the year. Okay.
So you're making visits whether you like it or not, right? You still have those roots and those connections there, so that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, I spend a little bit too much time in Ohio too. So I've got my in-laws live there, and then I got a brother-in-law on both sides of the state. So so I spend a little time in Ohio as well. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Tell us a little bit about your job at Buffalo Trace. What exactly was your role there?
So as a distillery supervisor, I worked directly underneath Harlan while I was there. So I worked there for about 4 years. Got to be over top of Warehouse X. I was responsible for the second shift production. So when I got hired on, we just started the second shift production and the distillery portion of it. So I was back there running with a group of about 17 guys. Pretty much all of them were brand new to the distillery side of it. They had been working in bottling or other portions of the plant. So I got to help teach them and learn myself over that time, and really got to know the process really well, and really got to do a whole lot of experiments and everything while I was there as well.
Yeah. Well, of course, when you talk about Buffalo Trace and Harlan Wheatley, man, they do a lot of experiments. So it had to be a cool opportunity for you learning the business. That's a neat thing. Tell us a little bit about working for Harlan Wheatley. What was it like? What was the man like? I mean, he's so fascinating for people like me because, I'm so into bourbon. I listen to podcasts, I make podcasts, I read blogs, I do everything, but Harlan doesn't participate in a whole lot of that stuff. So he's kind of got this little mysterious aura, despite the fact he's making some of the greatest whiskey in the world, some of the most coveted things that are out there. So tell us a little bit, behind the scenes about working with Harlan.
Yeah, I think it's just mainly because he's kind of a reserved guy, so he kind of likes to keep to himself. And as Sazerac has so many people that can talk to the press, so he's kind of sheltered by all those people that he can kind of pawn off to other people to delegate those duties a little bit, right? So
right.
He definitely likes to have his alone time and separation from work and family and having that time off. So even like going to trade shows, like we'll send other people to trade shows more often than not than Harlan having to go to himself, because I know he gets busy where he travels so much that he tries to just have some time off and stay at home for a little while.
I get it. I'm not being critical of it at all, because your ability to make great whiskey, and that's really all that we need him to do, right? In his role, doesn't mean that you enjoy, speaking in public or doing classes or whatever they want them to do, host dinners. There's all kinds of things they ask distillers to do these days. So I get it. And, I just want the opportunity to talk to him at some point, because I respect what he does. So that's why I want to talk to him. And hopefully he gets some of that too. He knows that people like him and they're interested in him. I don't know how connected he is.
Yeah. I mean, he understands what's going on out there, and
that's
he
cool.
knows that people like him. It's just, he likes to have that separation too.
Yeah, makes sense. Tell us a little bit about this journey to New York. So what I read that you enjoyed traveling there, you decided to make that your home, but tell us a little bit about what meant so much to you there, why you liked it so much. And then how do you then hook up with Taconic Distillery?
Yeah, so we came up for my 30th birthday. That was the first time I ever been to New York City.
Okay.
And just about a year before that, I had traveled to Europe, and that was my first time ever in Europe and seeing, being able to walk around everything, right? So that was amazing to me, and I never had seen that before in my life. And once I got to New York, and you had all those same similarities that you have in Europe, to where you can walk around. You have so many different cultures here. So for me, growing up in a town of about 5,000 people and only having one stoplight, it's a big transition for me, but it was something that I really enjoyed. And I just was like, all right, I gotta move there. So it took about a year after we visited New York before I found a job up in New York. And I really wanted to stay in distilling. So that's why it took forever for me to do that.
Yeah.
So I ended up even working out in Long Island at another distillery in between Buffalo Trace and Taconic. And they were doing whiskeys, but they also did vodkas and gins and all kinds of stuff. And it was just getting too much to where we spreading ourselves a little bit too thin, that I didn't like doing all those processes. So, and then Taconic was hiring a head distillers. And I got to basically come back to just making whiskey again. Yeah. And our still setup that we have, it's a Vendome column still. So it's 12-inch Vendome column still with a pot doubler. So it's similar setup that I was used to in Kentucky. So it was just basically going back home, but being in New York. So,
yeah. So you go there, and another interesting character to follow, because you got Paul Coughlin, great guy, one of the nicest people you ever met. But he's kind of a Type A personality. He's super athlete, has completed all these Ironman things and stuff like that. So what's it like working for him? What's he like? And of course, you're following him because he was the distiller too, as the company started. So you're taking over basically his role as he gets more of a company owner. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, he understood that he was very limited on distillation experience, right? So he knew he needed to bring somebody in that could help him increase the business. And just having my pedigree of working at Buffalo Trace,
that's pretty good.
Pretty easy. Yeah, it's pretty easy for me to get that job. Right. But yeah, working for him, it's been great, because he knows that he can kind of be a little more hands off and allow me to control day-to-day stuff. So it's kind of nice to where it's more like I get to kind of run my own distillery, even though I'm not having to foot the bill for anything. So Paul's just putting out all the cost of everything and making sure we run. And I just basically develop the plan and say, this is what we need to do over the next couple of years to be able to expand the growth that we have right now. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And it sounds like he gives you great support there, and the tools that you need to make the great whiskey you guys are making. And of course, it's showing up in all the awards and stuff like that you guys are winning. So very, very good stuff. Well, guess what? We're halfway through the interview. So that means it's time for our McNew question. McNew, here's your time.
Yep. So do you have a favorite product that you've created? Anything that you would consider as your baby?
So the first baby that I got to work on when I was there, since we already had some products out. So I've tried to keep all the same recipes as we were doing. So I just helped improve quality and efficiency on the stills. But the first one I had was our Miznar finished bourbon.
Oh yeah.
That was,
I remember that when that came out. Yeah.
Yeah. I visited a local cooper that I knew from back in the day when I worked at Buffalo Trace. Is the guy that made Titan barrels. He had some Miznar wood, and I was like, all right. I was like, I got to pull this in. I was like, I've never seen anybody use this. And now everybody's kind of using it in the bourbon world. So I was like, I got to try this out, do it. And it works out great for the way his barrels are designed, because it's American oak heads, but Miznar staves in a stainless steel container, because Miznar is very leaky. And so I don't have to deal with that problem as much as everybody else does with Miznar.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Brandon, when you have a group coming in, you can't get too much into the weeds because you don't know that maybe they're there just with a group of friends, and some of them might not even really be into whiskey. They're just kind of, you know, with their friends doing something. So, but our group's a little bit different. If you think about people that are going to seek out and watch something on YouTube, you know, an hour and a half program where people are talking about, they're really into it. So that's what we find when we do events and things like that. We've got people that are really into it. So tell us some of the things. You talked a little bit about your still, you know, the pot still with the doubler and that, but tell us a little bit about the things that people would enjoy seeing if they come to your distillery.
I mean, so we're a New York farm distillery. So for us, that means we have to use at least 75% New York grain. And we actually do some grain to glass on site. So we grow about 20 acres of corn on site for us. So you got to actually see the corn growing in the fields during the summers. And then we harvest it late fall, early winter to use throughout the beginning of winter time there. So it's really, you get to see a full scale process in a very tiny space. So we're doing everything in about a 7,000 square foot building, and you get to see start to stop all in the same day, which is usually not something that you get to see in the bigger distilleries, or you have to walk big distances in between, and they have a designated building towards the still, designated building towards the cookers.
You're all right there. Everything's there.
Yeah, everything's right there. Like, we're in a very tight space, and we're run by 2 production people. So it's myself and my assistant distiller, and that's it. Yeah. And we make about 800 barrels a year right now.
Yeah. So we, of course, we've talked about the fact you worked for Harlan Wheatley, and you know, I think that maybe you know, he's doing more experiments than anybody. You actually were in charge of Warehouse X, which is where all those experiments, you know, end up residing. So tell us a little bit about Taconic. Are you doing a bunch of experiments and things like that? Do you bring that as part of your role as a distiller now? Are you continuing to do those type of things?
Yeah, so it took a little bit of coaxing with Paul a little bit there in the beginning. So I didn't get to experiment too much at first. It took about a year and a half before I got into the role and was just making whiskey, and he understood and I knew what I was doing.
Right. There's a little freedom then, yeah.
Yeah, so I convinced him, let's do a single malt and let's do a wheated bourbon. So just knowing the good old-fashioned wheated bourbon recipes that Buffalo Trace knows, I took some of that experience and modified it a little bit so it's not infringing on anything. And then I took some stout recipes that I used to homebrew back in college.
Okay.
And add into my single malt recipe. So it's got a lot of different complex grains into that. It's different than most single malts would be. So it's got a lot of different flavor, and is designed to basically go into an American new oak barrel versus a lot of single malts. You want to use a used barrel or like a wine barrel or something like that to pick up some lighter flavors, so that way you're not overpowering the grain.
Yeah. You know, there's many aspects, as we talked about too already tonight, for, you know, that distiller role. You know, not only are you distilling, but you're also doing some personnel things. So you got people that report up to you. You know, you're responsible for the equipment and making sure that's running, forecasting and stuff like that. It sounds like you're doing some of that, experiments, and then things like this, being on the Bourbon Talk Show or doing an interview for a podcast or whatever it is. So tell us, what are some of your favorite parts of the job, and then the least favorite parts of the job?
Yeah, I mean, it's just being able to distill every day is a great job to have. I mean, there's not many jobs that you can beat that with, and especially where I'm at a craft distillery now versus being a distillery supervisor. I'm not sitting behind a desk. I'm going to do everything hands-on and basically use my knowledge instead of coercing somebody else to do what we needed them to do. It's a great job. I mean, it's hard to say there's any bad parts, but the only bad days is when stuff doesn't go right. Like if equipment breaks down, those are the only bad parts that's really tough, because then you're there for 14, 16 hours at a time versus getting in and out an 8 or 10 hour day.
Right. things that are out of your control just happens, and you got to deal with it. There's no way around it. You just got to deal with it. So yeah, I get
you
that.
can do all the maintenance in the world and all the preventative maintenance in the world, but sometimes rat chews through a temperature wire, and then your whole chiller is down for the day.
And it's never a snake chews. It's always again, snakes win. Snakes win. Yes. So, you've had the opportunity now to make Kentucky bourbon. You made New York bourbon. We're not going to ask you which is your favorite. There's no answer. There's no right or wrong answer there, really. But just compare and contrast a little bit the differences that you've seen. And of course, you're talking about one of the biggest scales in the world versus a small scale. That stands out right away. But what are some other things that you think are different in New York and Kentucky?
I mean, in New York, we're not really shooting to be Kentucky bourbon. I mean, Kentucky bourbon's had hundreds of years of experience and a way bigger head start than New York bourbon has. And
you can respect what they're doing. I love that too. Yeah.
New York's only been doing this for about 15 years. So, I mean, there's a big difference there, and just the scale wise and the age wise as it goes on too. And Kentucky bourbon is very usually light in the secondary grain. So you usually don't have a very heavy secondary grain. It's more corn heavy. A lot of the bourbons up in New York are very rye heavy. So it's still a 51% at least, but you are a lot higher rye percentages than what you would have in Kentucky. So you're going to be a lot bolder, and the rye helps it age a little quicker. So it being a 4-year whiskey will taste a little bit better than a high corn 4-year whiskey coming out of Kentucky. So it's kind of designed that way to be a little different. So there's no really comparison between either one. Yeah. It's fun getting to see how stuff has evolved, because when I was at Buffalo Trace, I kind of laughed at craft distilling, and I was like, that'll never take off. And I was like, how are they going to compete with 8-year-old whiskey? And now some of those craft distilleries are getting 8-year-old whiskey. So
yeah, they're catching up in terms of the aged products and things like that. But there's just something special about Kentucky, that's for sure. So I was just reading today this article, and I just thought it was cool. The Northern Kentucky, in 5 communities, they're having barrels painted that are going to kind of line the streets, kind of connecting businesses and stuff like that. And I just thought, it's just so cool how it's just ingrained into their culture. I mean, downtown areas with barrels lining the streets and stuff. It's just something special. And again, a great head start and those combination things. Kentucky's always the best, but that doesn't mean I'll never say that's the only great place you can make, bourbon. You can make great bourbon other places, but the home of bourbon is Kentucky for sure. No doubt about it. That's cool. Last question for you. Again, we always like to do a fun one at the end. If you aren't drinking whiskey, what would be your backup? Are we talking, you might be a beer guy, rum, cocktails, something else? What do you tell us? What would be, if you didn't have any whiskey on hand, which I'm sure you always do, but theoretically, if you didn't, what would be your backup?
Yeah. So right now I have a pretty stock bar, and
I'm sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I drink a lot of beer because I know a lot of the beer guys up here within New York, just because where we have so many barrels that we're trying to get rid of after we use them. We're trying to find a second home for them. So I work with a lot of local breweries, giving them barrels. So just in that aspect, I get so much free beer from all those guys. But we also drink a lot of mezcal, and we do a lot of homemade cocktails. So we have a whole bar set up here at the house that we make some of the best cocktails that we can probably make in a home setup.
So I think the answer to your favorite backup to whiskey is just yes. Yeah. Whatever it is. Beer, whatever. I get it. Well, Brandon, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Let's hear a round of applause for Brandon for coming on and talking. Let's tell a little bit about it. We'll wrap this one up, as we always do, by talking about where people can find us. Brandon, we'll start with you. If people want to follow the journey of your company, or even you personally, we're fine with whatever you'd like to share, okay?
Yeah. So you can follow us on Instagram at Taconic _ Distillery. You can find all of the updates there. We usually try to post a couple times a week. We'll definitely post anything that's new and upcoming. We'll have, like I said, those single malt and weeded bourbons should hopefully be this late fall area. So keep an eye out for those. But
That sounds good. All right, Maggie, how about you? Where can people find you?
Everywhere.
She's not lying.
So you can find me online at LouGirl502.com, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at LouGirl502. That's Lou is in Louisville. You can also find American Whiskey Magazine, AmericanWhiskeyMag.com, on Twitter at whiskey with an E magazine, and also on Instagram and the other one, Facebook, at American Whiskey Magazine.
All right. What about TikTok?
Yeah, no.
I mean, no, but for me either. I can't do that. Yeah.
Leave that to the young folks.
That's what I say. I'm too old for that nonsense. The people will tell me, McNew got on for a while, but I think she already burned down all of it, right?
Yeah,
McNew?
it was a lot to keep up with. Like, you got to be on that thing like multiple times a day. I got a real job. I can't do the TikTok.
Terrible to me. Yes, I know. All right, here we are enjoying vacation, and we'll wrap this one up as we always do by talking about where people can find us. Justine, we'll start with you. Where can people find you?
You can find me at JA_Maze on Instagram. You can find our shop at abvnetwork.com and on Instagram at ABV Network Shop.
All right, McNew.
I am on Instagram at McNew ABV.
All right, for me, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website, steveakeley.com. We've also got a company website. That thing's abvnetwork.com. Check it out because everything that we do is out there. Previous shows, blogs, so much more. Maybe you're going on a summer road trip. We've got about 3,000 shows you can listen to, so check us out at abvnetwork.com. Please also check out abvbarrelshop.com. Get on our email distribution list. We'll let you know what's in the store, when we're going to be getting things open. Our target date right now is July 9th. It looks very good for that. Of course, some of the things are out of our hands, licensing and that, but it looks like we're going to be on track for that. And, barring any bump in the road, we should be good to go. And I'm very excited about that. So there you go, abvbarrelshop.com. McNew, anything else to say before we get out of here?
I would like to remind the audience to please give us a 5-star review. That includes comments. It helps new people find the show, which is very important to us. And if you like what we're doing, we ask that you please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/the ABV Network.
All right, there you go. Well, the three of us will be back tomorrow when we introduce the next show while we're on vacation. Take care, everybody. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace. Before we finish the show, let's talk about some great companies that support the ABV network. First up is Moonshine Still Pro. Moonshine Still Pro has a full line of products to help the home distiller. Whether you want to experiment on the stove in your kitchen or you're looking for a bigger setup in your backyard, owner Russell Creed and his team can help. They have multiple still offerings, accessories, and even grain from their partners at Goldstone Mill to assist you in making whiskey on par with your favorite distillery. They can also help you with some fabricated parts you probably can't make yourself if you are attempting a DIY still project. Learn more or order your still or parts at moonshinestillpro.com. Another friend of ours is the Goldstein family at Goldstone Mill. The Goldsteins offer a variety of heritage and heirloom grains to make the finest whiskeys in the world. Plus, they are more than just a grain company. They are truly consultants to make sure the grains they are providing to you or your business meet your highest expectations. Additionally, they work with mills around the country, ensuring shipping is as low as possible for their customers. If you're a distillery, brewery, or even doing this at home, Goldstone can assist you. Check them out at goldstonemill.com, call them at 217-254-6613, or check in via email at hello@goldstonemill.com. Last but not least is the ABV Barrel Shop. While we don't get to play in the allocated bourbon game because we aren't selling the other products you have to do to get those, we do have access via our friendships in the bourbon industry to some really cool stuff. Have you ever seen your favorite craft distiller selling some really cool limited offerings only in their gift shop? I'm talking things like the hazmat offering Distillery 291 did for their 10th anniversary, or Neely Family Distillery's upcoming Papaw's birthday barrel. They don't have enough of it to send it out to distributors, so they only sell it via their gift shop. Well, companies like Distillery 291 and Neely Family Distillery have agreed to sell us 2 or 3 cases of these offerings moving forward, meaning our store will have the access to some of the rarest whiskeys in the world. Way more difficult to come by than the allocated bourbon offerings with a national release. Yes, they will be extremely tough to come by, but if you're a customer of our store, you'll have a chance to get them. Get signed up for our email or text list over at abvbarrelshop.com so you don't miss out.
The Bourbon Daily is part of the ABV Network. For more information or to become a sponsor, please visit abvnetwork.com. Thanks for listening and cheers.
This has been a Steve Akeley production.